Your Lie in April has always been an anime that I remember loving. I watched it years ago, and I couldn't really recall a lot of it, but I did remember the emotions that I felt when watching it. And going back to watch it now that 7 years have passed, I was kinda worried that it wouldn't be as impactful as I thought it was. But even after all this time, the show still hits just as hard, made me laugh, smile, and cry in all the same ways, and it turns out that that's something that fits in pretty damn well with the themes behind the show. Something that Your Lie in April tries to bring to the forefront from nearly the very first episode. So, with that being said, today, we're going to be talking about what it means to be immortal, and how Your Lie in April both discusses and achieves that immortality. Before we get into it though, just a quick reminder that every week we cover a new anime series or movie. Last week we did Fena Pirate Princess, and you all voted in the comments, so that next week will be The Ancient Magus Bride. In the comments this week, I want you to vote between Princess Mononoke or Weathering with You. And if you're enjoying the series, remember to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the new videos. But with all of that out of the way, let's talk about Your Lie in April, and obviously, spoilers ahead. Immortality is kind of an interesting subject, and it's no wonder that so many series and stories focus on this idea of living forever. Demon Slayer's Muzan Kibutsuji, Naruto's Orochimaru, Seven Deadly Sins, Bon, or To Your Eternity's Fushi. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of examples in anime alone, but the idea reaches far beyond just that medium. In fact, even the oldest story in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh, tells the tale of a man searching for immortality as he is terrified of death. And in that way, the story of searching for immortality is as old as stories themselves. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells the tale of King Gilgamesh, who was a demigod. And after the death of his friend, he goes out on a quest to find a method of attaining immortality. He never does find a way to live forever, however, along his journey he accomplishes many great things and becomes a legend, one whose name echoes throughout history and who lives on in his legacy. And interestingly enough, some of the most iconic figures in history also kind of fit into this idea as well. People like Alexander the Great, Martin Luther King Jr., and Shakespeare all becoming immortal through their deeds and their impact. However, maybe more fitting are the people like Beethoven or Mozart, and all the great composers who, despite having been dead for hundreds of years, are probably more recognizable and widely known than any celebrity of the modern era. People who live on not just in their name, but in their music as well. Your Lie in April's characters are not literally questing to live forever. In fact, some of the most important characters are constantly counting down to their own deaths. But they are aiming to become immortal through their legacy, through the impact that they leave on those hearts around them. Both Kosei's mother Saki and our female lead Kaori are told that they're dying, each looking to make the most of the time that they have left. And both of these characters go through this process of coming to terms with their own mortality and wanting to live on in similar yet very different ways. Saki finds out that she's going to die and begins to panic. We are originally told that Saki wanted to become a famous pianist and travel Europe performing, however, once she becomes ill, that dream becomes impossible. We're told that she then pushes her dream onto Kosei, forcing him to become this human metronome, this mechanical boy that could perform any score flawlessly, but in this cold and lifeless manner. In a technical sense, he would be perfect, a guarantee to win every competition and eventually be picked up to be a professional. But that isn't the entire story. In fact, it's pretty blatantly incorrect. Instead, this is just a memory that those looking in on the world and Kosei himself have of her. In reality, Saki never wanted Kosei to be a pianist. It was a hard and miserable life, and she didn't want him to have to face that. Instead, it was only after Hiroko notices Kosei's innate talent for the piano and begins begging Saki to teach him that Kosei begins to play. As I said though, Saki wasn't really interested in Kosei fulfilling her dream for her. She was worried not for herself, but for her son. Saki becomes terminally ill when Kosei is still fairly young, and she starts to worry that if she's gone, then Kosei will be left to fend for himself. And as a child, it isn't like she can ensure that he's going to be perfectly ready for the real world. But what she can do is foster his greatest talents, give him a possible path into the future. if she can ensure that Kosei is a skilled enough pianist, then even after she's gone, he'll be able to grow into someone great. This ultimately leading her to think that if she's on a very short clock, she can try to make him technically perfect. He won't understand the heart behind the music, but at least he'd be able to win competitions and support himself in the future, and maybe then he could learn about the emotional part of performing on his own. To say that this was a perfect plan is obviously untrue. At best, it took something Kosei loved and turned it into something cold and mechanical, but to say that I don't understand where she was coming from is also pretty unfair. A parent knowing that they're dying will do just about anything to set their kids up for success, both out of love and out of the desperation for the situation. And desperation is definitely the correct word here. The closer that Saki came to the end of her life, the more scared she became, and the more aggressive and abusive she acted. We see this culminating in her eventually beating Kosei for making mistakes in a competition briefly before she died. Kosei would only ever be able to see this part of her in the end, and after being beaten expresses that he wished she was already dead before running off. However, Hiroko stays with her, and Saki mentions how she has no more time left to give, saying, "If I'm not there, how will Kosei fare? Can he have a proper life? If his mom isn't there, can he live? Can he earn a meal off of his music?" And finally expressing that she thinks that she's a cruel mother for not being able to leave anything behind for him. As I said though, this isn't the part of his mother that clings to Kosei. Instead, he's being haunted by his guilt from telling his mother that he wished that she would die, and from letting her down. This becomes a specter, a ghostly version of his mother that appears and steals away his ability to hear his own music in what he considered to be a punishment for his actions. It wasn't until Kosei comes to peace with what happens and gives his mother a proper farewell through his music that he's actually able to remember more about her than just her face smiling at his failures. He begins to remember the moments where she taught him how to play, the gentle lessons filled with heart and kindness, about treating the piano like a newborn and putting yourself into the music, all things which happened either before or very early on in her illness. He remembers her playing Love Sorrow to teach him not to be afraid of sad times. He remembers her gentle smile as she held him. All the things that he had locked away behind that monster that she had become in his mind as her time ran out. Saki's immortality is not one where she lives forever. It's not one of legacy that her son would complete her dream of becoming a world-famous performer. It was instead that she wanted to live on in the way that he touched the piano, the pacing of his fingers, the way he stepped on the pedals. But not just in music, but also in his tastes, in the way he eats food, the way he brushes his teeth. But out of all the things that she wanted for Kosei, her biggest wish comes in one of her last lines of dialogue in the series, asking, "One day when you're grown, I wonder if you'll forget about me." But as Kosei says himself, in every small action he takes, his mother is there with him. In a similar lane, we have Kaori, another girl whose body is quickly failing due to a disease that is shutting it down. Realizing that she was going to die, Kaori decides that if she only has a short time left, she should make the most of it, do everything that she wanted to make sure that time shined. And one of the biggest things on her list of to-dos is to play music with Kosei, the boy who inspired her to play the violin in hopes that they could perform together in the future. But there's a lot more to it than that. One of the first and most referenced concepts presented in the story is that when you meet someone special or you fall in love, your world becomes colorful. And just as Kosei had brought color into Kaori's life through music, she wanted to do the same for him. After Saki died, Kosei had given up on the piano, so Kaori wanted to get him playing again, to help him learn that he could put not just the notes from the score, but also his soul into the keys as he played. She tells him that Mozart wanted them to go on a journey, and explains that it's music that frees you and lets you touch the hearts of those around you. And these are the things that Kaori successfully brings into Kosei's life. He stops seeing the world like black and white keys on a piano and instead starts feeling like every moment embodies April. He stops playing like a mechanical boy and learns to hear his own notes again. He puts his everything into his performance. Kaori truly transforms Kosei in a beautiful way, but the most important thing that she teaches him is how music connects people. You see, Kaori isn't just playing music for the love of it, and yes, that is a monumental part of who she is, but that's not everything. She isn't just playing to perform with Kosei, Kaori is playing so that she can become immortal. At the start of the story, she is this 14-year-old girl who embodies April, but is in the December of her life. She is staring down the Reaper and begging the world around her for just one thing. That after she's gone, she just wants them to remember that the violinist Kaori Miyazono existed. She just wants to know that the short life that she led has some kind of meaning and impact on those around her, and that's why she gets on stage. Kaori puts every bit of herself into every song that she plays. She takes the composer's works and makes them her own. They become tempestuous, captivating, and kind. She wants everyone listening to recognize who she is, and she wants her performance to live in their hearts forever, just as Kosei's had for her. What is probably Kaori's most iconic line in the story is, "Whether you're sad, a mess, or you've hit rock bottom, you have to play." That's how people like us survive. As she's staring down death, Kaori is doing everything she can to survive within the hearts of those around her, which is why just before her first concert with Kosei, when she thinks that he won't be her accompaniment, we see her breaking down into tears and begging him to perform with her.
Believe in me. Even a tiny bit. You don't know how close I am right now to just losing heart.
This performance isn't just a chance for her to play with the boy who inspired her to play violin. It is her last chance at survival. Later even saying that her reason to live is so that people who came to listen won't forget her, and so that she can live on in their hearts. And the more that Kaori's body begins shutting down, the more this idea of being remembered creeps to the forefront. Her last day out of the hospital is spent with Kosei, and they end up at the school late at night. Here, Kaori asks Kosei if he will forget her in one of my favorite scenes in the show. She is completely vulnerable and open. It's the first time that she's not framing it as, "I want to be remembered," and instead explaining that she is afraid to be forgotten. Mozart wanted us to go on a journey, and the reason that she set out on this path was to keep herself from fading away in the minds of those around her. Of course, regardless of the method, regardless of the journey, both Saki and Kaori find their way into Kosei's heart. They add color to his life, and by playing music with him, they learn about each other, understand each other, and their souls become intertwined. Their hearts overlap. The emotions released by the piano when Kosei plays aren't his alone, nor his mother's, nor Kaori's. They are the feelings and dreams of everyone who has been connected through their music. When you meet someone special, your whole world can go from being black and white like the keys on a piano to being as colorful as April. It's a beautiful thing the way that a person can change your whole perspective on the world, but they don't just stop at you. One of Kosei's big realizations in the final song is that he is not alone, explaining that from the moment that we first meet someone, anyone, we can never be alone again. Every person that we cross paths with etches themselves into who we are in some way or another. Even after they're gone, they will live on through us. And when we meet a new person and we etch ourselves onto their hearts, we're bringing along everyone who impacted us as well. It's a never-ending chain of hearts overlapping in a miraculous harmony. Mozart said to set off on a journey, and just as was the case for Gilgamesh, the journey that we set out on is where we become immortal. We meet new people, do fantastic things, and through the marks that we leave behind, we can live on in some way forever. And now that you've finished watching this video, I just have one question left for you.
Do you think that you'll remember me a little from time to time?